All right, back here on One Bills Live, Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to welcome in now CBS Sports football analyst Emory Hunt joining us as the Combine gets underway in Indianapolis. We'll be out there tomorrow and there through the rest of the week, but wanted to get some primer talk, if you will, and Emory's here to help us on that. So why don't we begin here, Emory, because the Bills have some, perceived positional needs, and it seems like they fall very well in line with some of the strengths of the draft in terms of depth at position. And that would be edge rusher, wide receiver, and corner, because you can make an argument, I think, for nickel corner and linebacker, where, change into a 3-4, they're going to need more bodies in here. So it sounds as though edge, linebacker, corner, and wide receiver have good classes to great classes in some cases. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. And firstly, Steve Tasker is a Hall of Famer in my book. So that's right off the gate. That's right.
All right, starting with bouquets.
Put Emory on our favorites list. Put Emory on the list.
Steve Tasker and my fellow Raging Cajun Brian Mitchell, Hall of Famers
there you go.
by far.
I would agree with that. Brian Mitchell was a different dude. I love that guy. Yeah, absolutely. But answer Brownie's question though.
So yeah, it's a deep class throughout, and we've seen this be the case ever since COVID, because more guys are getting eligibility. Some guys unlimited eligibility, and we're getting more experienced players on the back end. And on top of that, because of the way the game has changed, we're seeing now more 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. So we're seeing more wide receivers that have that time on task that they can step in right away and play right away. Because remember, the old adage used to be, it takes 3 years for a receiver to really get his – well, now you see guys hit the ground running. And on the other side of the ball, you have the byproduct of the offense. You're seeing more nickel being base, more dime being base in some cases. So you're getting more corners and safeties that can get out there and cover. So the depth there is evident. And the pass rushers, as you talked about, the edge rushers, because guys are throwing the ball a lot more in college, you're getting guys that can get to the quarterback. So we're going to see this deep class because it trickles up. So what we're getting from the high school game, you'll get in the college game, and you'll see it trickle up to the pro game. So, yes, it's deep across the board.
Well, we know that your analysis spans the whole game. And I want to ask you, do you see – what's the college game given the pro game? Because now you're getting – it was, 10 years ago where players started coming out of college more and more polished and specialized. They were getting better coaching down in the flag football, into the contact football, off-season 7-on-7 stuff going on, happened all over the last 15 years or so, couple of generations of players. How is that game changing into positionless football on the defensive side and positionless football on the offense? When you get to the skill guys, you got wide receivers coming in, helping in the run game. You got tight ends that are splitting out and running backs that are being used even more diversely than they ever have been. So how do you think that affects, when you look at these classes, what that means and what it's going to tell us about this draft coming up?
That's a great question, because when you look at I put together a draft guide that has over 1,000 individual scouting reports every year, and I've noticed this the last 5. I had to segment certain things because it no longer is just standard QB, running back, wide receiver type. So let's say, for instance, for a wide receiver, I break them down into four positions. Your split end, I still call it split end, but your X receiver, your flanker, your Z, your slot receiver, your big inside receiver. Think in terms of Marcus Colson as that prototype of that position. For tight ends, I use 3 different positions. You have inline, your H-back, and your flex tight end, which is your bigger wide receivers that tight ends that don't want to block. So they essentially want to be wide receivers, right? So that one. And then for the fullback, you kind of have your classic fullback and what I like to call your single back, a guy that can tote the rock if need be, but also can be a blocker as a fullback. So we're in on defense. You got even though everything's played in the middle in the NFL, I still like to designate it boundary corner, field corner, slot corner, safeties that go free, strong, and slot safety or combo safety that could play either both or down in a nickel situation. So you have to start to designate, because you see the game differently time and time again at the collegiate level. So it's like, okay, well, this guy is probably not twitchy enough to be an outside corner, but he's physical enough to where he can play one-on-one. He can match up versus tight ends. I'll call him a combo safety. Or you may get the receiver that used to just be your standard slot receiver. But man, he's 5'10", 195, 5'10", 200. He can tote the rock a little bit. We get him on an end around or a jet sweep or one of these tap touch passes where you get the ball in his hands and he's able to do some creative things. Think like a Zachariah Branch out of Georgia via USC in this year's draft class fits that mold to a T. And when you're seeing the positionless football that we're seeing up front on both sides, you're looking at edge guys that are, not. We used to just call them weak side defensive ends. Now they're called edge rushers, right? And so you have your under tackles, you have your nose tackles. So you kind of have to really silo guys into where they could best fit, because that's what we're getting from the collegiate level.
I want to dive into more of the depth of the class that you talked about, Emory, because as you know, the Bills for the last several years are picking at the bottom of the round. And a lot of times what they're after is off the board, particularly in round one. And I expect the same to be the case at the edge rusher position. The Bills are switching to a 3-4 system under new defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard. So there's going to be some turnover there in terms of scheme fits. But as you said, the edge rusher class is very good. It's also deep. But there's about 18, 20 teams that can make an argument for needing an edge rusher. So they're going to fly off the board. And you're picking 26th. So my question to you, Emory, is let's assume the value isn't there and they don't have an edge rusher with a first-round grade by the time they're on the board at 26. What could they get on day two that could still – do you think the class is deep enough where on day two the Bills could still get themselves an edge rusher with some enticing potential?
See, here's the thing. I got a running list of things that were a mistake in life. Number one being speakerphone. That's by far, so one speakerphone – mock draft would be somewhere in the top three, because the mock drafts make people believe there's only one round in terms of acquiring talent. And because I go so deep and evaluate these prospects, I'm like, bro, I'm excited about this 7th-round guy that they got, or this guy they got as an undrafted free agent, like the kid Wande Owens from New Hampshire. Phenomenal player. He's on the Bills practice squad. Outstanding football player, right? But that's just me being a geek and a nerd studying all these prospects. So there's more talent outside of round one is what I'm saying. So even if the Bills don't get a guy whom they've seen constantly over and over again in these mock drafts in round one, don't fret. In day two, you can find yourself a Cassius Marsh of Texas A&M, a guy that just phenomenal in terms of getting to the quarterback and what he does really well. Cassius Howell, Marsh played at UCLA. Harold Perkins, unique player. When we first saw Harold Perkins out of LSU, he looked like the next coming of Micah Parsons. And then the next year they moved him to off-ball linebacker, and he was spending time covering running backs and tight ends. And this past season, he played more of a star position in terms of like a strong safety / linebacker hybrid, but he still can get after the quarterback. And Jim Leonhard, we know he played at Wisconsin. We just saw at the East-West Shrine Bowl, Mason Reiger win MVP. 3 sacks in that ball game, getting to the quarterback. That's a guy you can probably get on day 3. So you have body types, different body types. Howell is more of your traditional edge guy that could put his hand in the dirt, but also can stand up because he has that type of athleticism. Rager is someone that can be, just your straight third down, go get him. Perkins would be unique because where can he fit? He can fit everywhere, so he can fit on the edge as an undersized guy. He can blitz from the interior linebacker position. Or if you want to have more guys that can get to the quarterback or fly to the football on the field, he could be your star, your hybrid, your viper, as some people call it. So there are options there. Akeem Mesidor, I know that's another name. I'm not too particular about age right now because everybody's coming out of college 25 years old. So at the end of the day, you got to live with it. And so those are some types that could still be there if they want to go defense, but there's a lot of good talent in this class.
One of the things that always happens in this, you get to the combine and a couple of names, less than a handful really, these guys test out. It's like, who is that? Right? They come in, they got all these measurables, and you get into this draft, and even casual fans do it. This guy's got all the intangibles. He's a leader, works hard, he's smart and does all that, but he's got no measurables. He's too small, too short, his arms are too short, he's not fast enough. And then there's the other guys that have all the measurables, they look the part, but they can't play, but you don't know if they can play. There's something about them, right? So who is going to be, if there's a short list of guys who, after this combine this week, we're going to say, yeah, I know that guy. Who's going to be the guy that explodes onto everybody's list?
This guy I've been following since January because I attend all the All-Star games, and I saw him at 4 of them. So it's Chris Hilton out of LSU. It was fascinating because we get to the Hula Bowl, and he's out there with no equipment because LSU shipped his equipment to the American Bowl, which is the following week in the same state. The Hula Bowl was practiced in Daytona Beach. The American Bowl is going to be in Orlando. So he's out there at the Hula with no equipment. But so they had like 11 other guys that had their equipment issues. So they had to create a period for these guys to get some work in. But his speed and explosiveness was evident. So I talked to him. I was like, hey, man, he's like, listen, bro, I'm playing in all these All-Star games because my tape at LSU, I don't have the level of productivity that warrants me only playing in one. So I got to go out here and play in all of them. So I was like, I love that attitude. So I see him the following week at the American Bowl, wears equipment, and he has a great week. Then he goes to the East-West Shrine Bowl and has a stellar week there. Now, because of his performance there, he got the Combine invite. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl and balls out there. So you talk about someone that wants it, and he could fly. So he's going to run in the 4.3s. And so that's going to help his case out. The fact that I know he's going to participate in all the drills, that's going to help his case out. And he has this story of playing in all 4 All-Star games on the circuit that no one has ever done. That's going to help his case. And I think that's going to be big for him. Brennan Thompson, the wide receiver from Mississippi State, he's built like Kavontae Turpin. So he's a light guy. But with that lack of girth and density, he can fly too. He's probably going to run the 4.2s. And we know everyone wants to, as much as we clown the 40-yard dash, we can't stop watching the 40-yard dash because everybody wants to know who's fast. And so those 2 guys are going to fly. And I also, I know it's not a position of need for Buffalo, but Taylor Green is I mean, I'm old school to where if I'm watching Taylor Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas, instantly I see Randall Cunningham. Bendy athleticism, takes 2 steps, he doesn't cover 10 yards. Worked with Bob Petrino the last 2 seasons, so you know his acumen is where it needs to be. He's going to run the fastest, probably going to run 4.4. And he's going to throw at all the positional drills. So those type of guys are going to be the names. He has a chance to really be the QB2 in this class with a great week. I know he's going to test well, and when he throws well, he looks like Kaepernick, he looks like Cunningham, he looks like Vince Young. I think all of that will show itself out well in Indy.
With trends in the league, we've seen teams kind of gravitate back more to the running game, and it looks like defenses are trying to adjust. And part of that is at the second level where linebackers that go 220, 225 just aren't going to be as successful anymore. How much do you anticipate, and I understand there are exceptions, there are linebackers that play quote-unquote bigger than their size, but how much do you anticipate teams with the proliferation or the return of the run game being a bigger part of offenses across the league? How much is weight and size and those measurables for inside linebacker prospects going to matter, maybe more than previous years?
Yeah, that's a good point because I feel like you could run the risk of going for weight, but you still may run into the same issue that you see with some of these guys that are 215, 220. The mindset has to change. You got to want to tackle. You got to want to stop the run. A lot of these linebackers nowadays are peekaboo linebackers. They'll wait and see. They want to wait and see if the guy is over before you got to go through another human being to get to the other human being with the ball. And so until you find those guys with that mentality, therefore, you still may run into the same issue. Now, weight may be more of a, where they focus because some teams tend to think, well, this is why we can't stop the run. But in reality, it has nothing to do with weight. It's more so about your effort and want to. And because a lot of these teams are wanting to throw the football, you may see teams just try to load up on players from Bama, Georgia, all these teams that line up and run the football. That a byproduct of that is that your defense that you practice against every day will be, have those calluses to really stop the run. So I can see a lot of Georgia backers getting drafted. I can see some Bama backers getting drafted. Iowa. So those teams that tend to run the football will have backers that will find themselves getting drafted because of that reason.
And one of these, the thing about these rosters, particularly in the NFL, you build your roster by going out in the draft like we're about to do, every team's about to do, and draft the best players available. And then you find out what they can do, and then you find out how you can run your offense around them and your defense around them. So with this pendulum that seems to be moving, even as each year goes by, 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was a pass 60% of the time, run 40 or even more, pass 63% of the time, run 37% of the time. With this pendulum moving all the time, is that the only way or the best way for teams to dictate matchups as these games start taking place, where this team's built for stopping the run, let's spread them out, and vice versa?
I think that's absolutely correct. That's why I always apply the philosophy. You have to be strong right down your battery. Center, nose tackle, Mike backer, free safety, quarterback, running back. If you're strong right down the middle of your football team, you're going to be good. Everything else will change with that swinging pendulum that you talked about. But if you're strong right down the middle, that never changes. The closer you are to the ball, the more important you are. So if teams can focus on nailing the center position, nailing that nose tackle, getting a good cerebral Mike backer that's not afraid to tackle, and a safety that can exemplify that same cerebralness with the range to cover sideline to sideline and turn the ball over, you're going to be good. A quarterback that doesn't make mistakes, a back that can, handle volume, but also handle the situation of knowing when yards are needed and when to take, what the defense gives them and when to try to hit that home run. If teams can focus on that, that'll keep them consistent no matter what swing in the time or what swing in the era we're in, because those things don't change. And that's going all the way back to 1869 when Rutgers and Princeton played down there in Central Jersey and started this game we love called football.
All right, last one I've got for you, Emory. And look, Bills fans have been receiver obsessed ever since Stephon Diggs got traded to Houston, and they feel that the Bills are wayward on offense at receiver without a true alpha male number one receiver. Now, I'm not saying they're going to definitively find one in the draft this year, but just from a depth perspective, I mean, you said you do 1,000 reports. How many receivers would you say you have graded in the first 3 rounds in this year's class, just to kind of give us a framework of what kind of depth there might be there through the first 2 days?
I'd say 5 have really, high-end grades from me. Mekhi Lemon is my number 1 slot. Jordan Tyson is my number 1 X. I look at my number 1 Z being Carnell Tate. My number 1 inside receiver is Denzel Boston. So those guys are the top of those positions. But when you go deeper, you have a Chris Brazil out of Tennessee who's 6'5" and can fly, right? You also have a guy underrated, but I have a high grade on, in Ted Hurst out of Georgia State. Plays a lot like George Pickens, has that same mentality where it's his ball and nobody else's, and he doesn't care who's around him. He's coming down with the football. I also am a big, and this is later in the draft, maybe day 2, Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State. 6'5", 6'3", 205 pounds, brother of Trey Lance. But you talk about someone with the big size to go and play above the rim, but has the athleticism to really get out of dodge when he has the ball in his hands. He could weave in and out of traffic like a New York cab. So you have a big guy that has that frame, but also has that agility to weave through a defense. Those are the type of guys you kind of want. Zachariah Branch, I talked about. I have a high grade on Brendan Thompson because even though he's a lighter guy and can fly, you watch him as an outside receiver, I think he's more of a Z than a slot. People will pigeonhole him because of his size, but he plays like an outside receiver because of how he can get off the line of scrimmage, and he tracks the ball extremely well. So when you have that ability to play bigger than your size, but also have that speed to really stretch the defense, it opens up everything else for your offense. So there's a bunch of receivers that I have good grades on that if you don't get one in round 1, you'll be more than likely fine in round 2.
Awesome stuff, Emory. We appreciate the time, and we appreciate the grind because I know I don't have time to go through 1,000 reports, so thank you for doing that. And we'll keep an eye on your stuff over there at CBSSports.com. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.